So a question I see a lot online is how to seal your wood panel or your canvas for alcohol inks. And this product will work for either one of them. Doesn't matter, I've used them on both. And you definitely do want to seal them. Alcohol inks work best on non-porous surfaces. And if you try to do it on a porous surface, they just soak in, and the beauty of alcohol inks doesn't show through. So you definitely want to prime them before you actually do your alcohol ink work on them. And this is what I like to use, Kills Primer. It works absolutely beautiful. I've been using it for a long time. So I like to put mine on with a roller. I just prefer not to have brush strokes. No other reason than personal preference. I've seen other times where people have used brushes to put them on, and that's totally fine. I just like to have the texture from the roller instead of a brush. So I have a little foam roller here. And the first thing I'm going to do is get my sides. Typically I will have this propped up on painter's pyramids so that I don't get my panel stuck to my surface, but I have a silicone mat here. Oops. So it'll be easy to clean off. And I typically also do 2 coats, just in case something was missed with the first one. I like to add a second coat to it. And as you can see, I also do the sides. Because when you're working with alcohol inks, often they will run down the sides, and unless you intend to paint the sides once you're done, I like my sides to look nice as well. So once I have the sides done, I will do my 2 long edges. I'll basically I'll do around all of the sides, and then I'll do the center. And I usually hold it in the center just so, because this particular mat likes to slide around on my desk here. All right, once I've got it all covered, I go like this. Make sure that I don't have any lines or streaks, that it's all an even texture. All right, I'm gonna wait for that to dry, and then I will add a second coat. We'll see it. My first coat is totally dry, and really it took maybe like 5 minutes. It dries super, super quick. That's another reason why I absolutely love it. It works and it dries quick. So once again, I do a second coat on my sides. Really, I wasn't thinking I should have put my paint tray to my right since I'm right-handed, but that's all right. Now let's do the front. So when you're doing the second coat, you definitely, obviously, notice that it doesn't absorb into the surface as much because the surface is already sealed. But I just like to make sure that I haven't accidentally missed any areas, because you know how sometimes when you're painting and then once it's dry, you see that there's some really, really barely covered areas. I like to make sure that I don't have that, so I do the second coat, and so far it hasn't done me wrong. All right, so the second coat is on there. We are going to let that dry completely, and I'm going to clean all my tools here off, and then when we're done, we're going to do some alcohol inks on them. We'll see you then. All right, our base coat is completely dry, and for this piece I'm actually only going to use 2 colors. Whoops. I'm going to use the pitch black alcohol ink, and then I'm going to use the rose alloy. And the thing I like about pitch black, and there's a couple other colors, denim is another one and eggplant is another one, is as you're using them you get different colors that come out of them, and I find it fascinating. So it's one of my favorites to use. One of the colors that comes out of it is like a pinky tone, which is why I wanted to try the rose alloy with it. The rose alloy is a new one, so I've sampled on a tiny little piece of paper, or a piece of Yupo, but I haven't actually used it on a project yet, so I'm excited to use that. I have some isopropyl alcohol. It's 99%. I've got it in a spray bottle and in a dropper bottle. I will only be using it when I'm just using the black though. When it comes to alloys, it needs the resins in the alcohol blending solution in order to work properly. So once I start adding the rose, I'm going to be using the blending solution. So all I do to start is I put a few drops. I have my dropper bottle ready to go. And then I just start blowing it around. Now, whoops, you don't want to splatter it like that. Typically when I'm doing alcohol ink projects, I have a Copic compressor underneath my desk that I tend to use. I'm going to spray this to mute those. With this primer, if you do this, you will be able to bleach it out with some isopropyl alcohol. You will not be able to completely remove the color. So typically we try not to do any splatters, and if I get them, I try to clean them up as quick as possible. I usually use my dropper bottle with my alcohol inks rather than the sprayer, because the sprayer goes over the entire surface, and I tend to want to have a little bit more control and just work in a certain area. So as I was saying, I typically use my Copic compressor for alcohol inks. It's just a little bit more of a burst of air, but it's not something that is accessible for a lot of people. For most people, just using it with alcohol inks, it doesn't make any sense. So I'm using my alcohol blower tool, because that's what a lot of people will be easily able to get. And it's definitely more affordable if you're wanting to try with alcohol inks. So I do let the alcohol ink just drop right off the side of my piece. I have my piece on top of some painter's pyramids so that when it does drop off the side of my piece, it's not going to pool or anything. And you can see I typically work from top left to bottom right. I don't know why, I just find that I do, and anytime that I go to do something and think, I'm going to do something different this time, I still do it. So if you notice where I moved some alcohol there, there's some like a blue-green showing. It's kind of fascinating to see what colors come out when you're working with it. And if you get lines that are too harsh, like that there is too harsh, just put some alcohol around it and then slowly move it back and forth. My first layer, I'm typically trying to just get the base coat. I like to get some lights and darks in it, and I like to get the first layer down before starting to add any metallics or alloys or whatnot with it. This wood panel is 8 by 10, which for me is a good size to start out with. You could even start out with just some Yupo paper, and then you can choose whatever size you're wanting. It's another good surface to work on. But I love the dimension that you get when you're working with canvases and wood panels. Another way to get that dimension is to layer your alcohol ink between layers of resin, which is another thing that I really like doing. I have a video on here where I've done that, and I'll link it in the description and at the end of the video. And I also have a couple classes that I created where we're using alcohol inks and then putting layers of resin in between just to give it some dimension, and I'll link those down below in the description. Now you can see, especially to start, the black is quite a dark color, and it goes a long way. So I had what, 6-8 drips to start, and I haven't added any more alcohol. I'm just adding the isopropyl alcohol to move it around. And you can see I'm just going from one end or one side to the other, trying to get some lights and darks. And anytime I don't necessarily love an edge, I just add some more isopropyl. So I think from now, I'm just going to stop talking and you can just watch the process. All right. Sometimes the hardest part is knowing exactly when to stop and when to keep going, but I'm going to stop now. So I'm just going to let it completely dry. And then I've got all sorts of drips along the side of my piece here. I'm going to take some isopropyl alcohol and a paintbrush, and I'm just going to soften them just to make them blend a little bit more. And then I'm going to let that dry as well. To seal your alcohol inks, I use Kamar Varnish before putting anything else on it. So I do a couple light coats of Kamar Varnish, probably about 3. Make sure they're light, because if they're not light, they will react with your alcohol inks and make them start to move again. And then I put some UV resistant spray on as well. And after that, you can put a gloss spray on it if you want it to be gloss. You could put resin on it if you want it to be resin. It's completely your choice how to finish it after that. But notice the little green blues that come out of here. There's some navy that's in amongst here, and that's one of my favorite things about this particular, about using the black, is how that happens. Now there's some little pink tones, but I don't know, because I use the rose alloy, I'm not sure if it's from the alcohol ink or if it's from the rose alloy, and really it doesn't matter. It ties in the rose gold metallic flecks that are throughout the piece. And then you'll notice that sometimes I was working on here and then I would work on here, and that's so that this could dry a little bit before working on it again. Sometimes you'll find that it gets just too wet, that you're not really doing much, and you have to let it dry a little bit before coming back to the piece. So there you go. I hope that was helpful for you. We'll see you in the next video.